Well, welcome to session 10, job analysis. Can you feel the excitement building? I bet you are all sitting there on the edge of your seat just tingling with anticipation. And for those of you who are fortunate enough to be experiencing those sensations right now, you really need to get a life. Job analysis is boring, at least in my opinion. A few years back, my wife and I were with my daughter and son-in-law on a trip to Dallas, Texas. We were all attending a conference, and during one of the days off, we rented a car and took a tour of the surrounding area. My wife and I lived in Fort Worth and the vicinity right after we were married for 2 years. Naturally, our tour concentrated on finding our old abodes and our old hanging out places, marveling at how the place had changed in only 40 years. Imagine that. And we were telling story after story about our young adventure in Texas. Our daughter and son-in-law nodded their heads, appropriately intoned surprise and astonishment for over 4 hours. Later, they confessed that it was one of the most boring times of their lives. But they did it because they felt they had to. They had to endure it because it had a positive outcome for someone else, namely my wife and I. Such as job analysis. It's necessary. You have to do it, but it's still boring. Now, I'm sure compensation specialists would vehemently argue that point, but to each his own. It is indeed a very necessary task and one that is important for organizations. You must have a way to describe jobs and specify the talents, traits, and skills needed to perform those jobs. Further, you need to have some mechanism to evaluate the jobs, some way to compare the jobs one to another and place a value on them so that pay is appropriate to the contribution of the job to the organization's success. That's obviously important, but it still doesn't make it any less boring. In this lecture, I'll start out with a recap of where we have been. It's important to stop at some point and review and put into context the topics we've already covered. We will then launch into the topic of job analysis, leaning heavily on the text material. The authors do a good job of covering the topic, and I'll only try to add a bit of clarity here and there. But once again, we use job analysis in our personal lives, but we just don't realize it. When you decided to enroll in college, I'll bet one question that bounced around in your brain was, quote, I wonder what a college student really does, end quote. I wonder what skills I need to be a good college student. I wonder what college professors expect and require. Is it different than high school? You started collecting data in your head. You developed a description for a student and a list of specifications you could compare yourself to, and you engaged in job analysis of the student's occupation. And that was an important step to prepare you to be a student and to be successful. It's real life. Let's explore the boring but real world of job analysis. Sometimes as we go forward in classes, we tend to treat each session as a separate learning activity and miss the connection between important topics. So before we go jumping off into job analysis, let's do a little recap and figure out just exactly where we are, and perhaps more importantly, where are we going from here? If I were to simplify the title of this class, it would probably be Getting and Keeping People. I guess it's been about 10 weeks ago we started by discussing the getting part. We asserted the importance of staffing, selection, and recruiting. I pointed out and tried hard to justify the notion that this getting activity should be strategic and well thought out in advance rather than just a reaction to an open position in the organization. I also implied that staffing activities operate as a safety valve that allows for growth of the organization. Staffing allows us to do the things we are not currently equipped to do in the organization. Staffing is not necessarily something we want to have to deploy regularly, but when needed, it must be the best. We discuss the nuances of external recruiting and then the many particulars of evaluating and selecting the right candidate both internally and externally. Perhaps lost in the details of the discussions is the pure fact that the base of selecting the right person is an understanding of what is needed to do the job. Sounds simple, but there are many methods and tools available to gain that understanding. Actually, it's more than understanding, it's being able to communicate those details to others so there is consistency in our recruiting and selection efforts. Everyone involved in the staffing, selection, and recruiting process must sing from the same songbook in terms of what is required and desired in the job. If there is chaos in the understanding of the job and what is required to perform the position effectively, there will be chaos in the ultimate selection decision. And that kind of chaos creates bad outcomes for organizations. We reviewed the importance of compensation and pay models, and once again, the significance of having a compensation strategy. I also discussed the battle for the buck and HR's critical role in fighting that battle to ensure that we make an effective and intelligent investment rather than merely spending money. And that brings us to this week. I mentioned in an earlier session that staffing, selection, and recruiting are hooked to compensation at the hip. I also explained that relationship in terms that asserted bad compensation practices or good compensation practices impacts our staffing activities. That connection or relationship is somewhat soft in that it is difficult to measure and quantify. How much does an organization's poor compensation practices impact staffing? We know intuitively that there's an impact, but how do we quantify and communicate that impact? But as we enter our discussion of job analysis and structures, that connection becomes a hard link. That hard link between compensation and staffing and selection activities begins with job analysis. Simply put, poor job analysis and job descriptions make us look for the wrong things in our staffing efforts. Either we look for the wrong traits and skills because we have identified the wrong task that must be accomplished, or if the job description is outdated, we look for the things we needed yesterday and not today and tomorrow. Either scenario is not good. So this week we will change the direction of our journey a bit. We will now explore one part of the keeping people strategy. There are lots of ways to keep people and keep people happy and productive. Some more effective and influential than others, but certainly effective pay policies represent one of the most important and influential methods to keep or not keep people. And this week we started the discussion of developing the structure upon which to build the policies and practices governing our pay activities. You see, pay is not just writing a check. That's the easy part. It's how we pay that makes the difference. It's what we reward. It's how we reward. It's what job skills we value. It's what jobs we value. It's our relationship with the external marketplace related to those skills, traits, and jobs we value. And the foundation of all of that is developing a base pay program. The following website details the steps for establishing a base pay program. The steps for establishing a base pay program, according to this website, are job analysis, job evaluation, market analysis, salary structure development, performance management process, merit increase administration, and salary management. We will be covering each step in varying degrees over the next several weeks. I should point out that we will not cover the performance management process in great detail, simply because this is such a complex topic that it would take more time than we have available to cover it properly. However, I hope to at least establish a connection between performance management and compensation practices. And as you can see, job analysis is the first step. The text defines job analysis as the systematic process of collecting information that identifies similarities and differences in work. And this process yields two outcomes: job descriptions and job specifications. Of course, job descriptions detail tasks, duties, and responsibilities that make up the job. Job specifications detail the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are necessary to perform the job. You will find these definitions in the text. To put it differently, job descriptions detail the dish we are about to prepare, and job specifications detail the ingredients. And that's an interesting analogy in that it brings up one of the strengths and also the problems with job descriptions and specifications. If we are preparing a dish, we know what we want it to look like in the end. But there are many variables that affect that outcome. Although the dish may look the same regardless of where it's prepared and who prepares it, the dish may taste very differently. The variation in taste comes from the different amounts of ingredients included. We may make our dish spicier or saltier or more dry or moister, etc. Jobs may look the same on the outside, but internally may be very different depending on the mix of knowledge, skills, abilities, tasks, and responsibilities that make up the final product. That's dependent upon the organization, the current situation, the resources available, to name just a few of the situational factors. Let's explore this variability a little further. Pick a job, any job. Student, baker, attorney, welder, teacher, quarterback, coach, HR professional, president of the United States. All are jobs we see all the time, but what do they really do and what is required in that particular job from the incumbents? What traits and skills are necessary to accomplish those activities? The text mentions the ONET website. Take a moment to go to the ONET site and look at it, or go to www.onetonline.org. Both sites contain a wealth of information about various jobs, including descriptions, specifications, future outlook, etc. Go to ONET Online and look up Human Resource Specialist, which has a very bright future outlook, by the way. You will find a lot of information on the site that is useful for you as a job applicant, but also useful to organizations. This is a great tool and one worth investing some time and energy exploring. I compared in an earlier session staffing activities as an art in that it is difficult to quantify the information and decisions are ultimately made using a lot of subjective or quote feel criteria. I contrasted compensation, saying that it is more science since compensation data is quantifiable, but then hedged a bit and stated that some of the compensation decisions are artful as well. Job analysis and structures represent a lot of the art of compensation. I'm sure you watch these cooking shows on TV and notice that there is a particular recipe for a specific dish. But the chef doesn't follow the recipe as described. Instead of meticulously measuring a teaspoon of salt, the chef sprinkles the salt based on how he or she feels about the dish. Instead of measuring 3 cups of water, they just pour water into a bowl until it feels or looks right. I, on the other hand, meticulously measure each ingredient. I follow the recipe to the letter. That's why I cook and I don't create. Chefs practice the art of cooking, and I merely cook. We use the same ingredients, but just in different proportions depending on the situation and the variables at hand. When doing a job analysis or when hiring for, let's say, a human resource professional, I may require 7 to 10 years experience. But based on the current situation and anticipated needs, I may require nearer 10 years experience and desire that experience in the electronics industry. Same ingredients, but in different proportions. That's the art applied rather than the strict science. In that situation, I'm a chef and not just a cook. Let's look at the job of President of the United States. That job description and specifications fill the airways every day, and we all have our own idea as to what is really involved in doing a good job as president. I bet if we all wrote a job description for this position, they would all be different. Some would emphasize some aspects of the job and de-emphasize other aspects. Otherwise, others would emphasize different parts of the job. And those emphases would differ depending on the state of the nation, current events, and current and past incumbents in the job. If job analysis was totally objective and a scientific process, all job descriptions would be the same. Obviously, that's not the case. Job analysis activities leaves room for interpretation and subjectivity, and that's a good thing. I know what you're thinking. Well, that's not a good example. The job of the president is too complex. It changes all the time. That's true, but the basics of the job are the same. It requires certain skills and traits and experience to initially perform all of the duties. But the emphasis or weight of those skills, traits, and experiences is what changes with different situations. But isn't that the same with all jobs? We can readily see it with the president's job, but how about the job of parent? Isn't the job description of a parent different today than in previous generations? Actually, doesn't the job description of a parent change as a child grows older? Parental responsibilities and tasks when a child is 2 years old is vastly different than when the child reaches 16. The job changes with time. The basics are the same, but the importance, emphasis, and weight of certain required skills and traits change. Why can't we just keep following the recipe? Because jobs keep changing. They keep changing with the internal and external environment. And thus, we have stumbled on one of the main problems with the job analysis process. The results must be reviewed and modified regularly. I've worked in organizations where the job descriptions and specifications were a decade old or more. The organization's expressed expectations and requirements were outdated. When hiring, we were looking for things we needed a long time ago instead of what we needed now, let alone our needs anticipated to the future. Job analysis is not a task on the to-do list that is checked off and forgotten. It is an ongoing process with real consequences. The authors in the text detail why organizations should perform job analysis. I suggest you read that short section. And from the above discussion, I assert that job analysis should be an ongoing process and the result of job descriptions and specifications are revised regularly. And this process is outlined nicely in Exhibit 4.5 in the text. It's certainly worth reading. And then another note from the text that requires emphasis. There are a number of tools and processes used to perform job analysis. One of the critical ingredients in all processes is the support of top management and union officials if applicable. You will find this short argument in the text. I want to point out that you must seek this support, but be mindful that union officials and top management are rarely objective on this subject. Bias on the part of both parties are based on several factors, including where the individual came from. Are they a marketing, sales, or accounting person, or HR, or engineering, or manufacturing? Based on their favorite incumbents in different jobs and their past experiences. Regardless of where the bias began, the individual biases may influence the outcome of the process. When seeking support of these groups, make sure they do not unduly influence the description or specifications of the job. I'll discuss more on this in future sessions. Another area you should read in the text defines the ADA and job analysis. The authors point out that some job descriptions detail essential functions of the job to meet ADA specifications. It is not required that employers detail essential functions, but I believe it is an important part of any job description or specification. Essential functions simplify all the verbiage included in descriptions and specifications and answers the simple questions: what does this job do? And what is needed to perform this job? In addition, essential functions encourage inclusion of the disabled in our workforce. I'm biased in this respect because I have someone disabled in my family, but such individuals bring a lot to any workplace and generally make wonderful employees. Finally, the text discusses job analysis as a bureaucracy or a bedrock of the organization. Is job analysis a waste of time or a necessary function in the organization? The answer to those questions is quite simply yes. Job analysis is a waste of time and an important function, depending on the organization and the investment put into that process. When I worked for RCA, I was in charge of compensation. We conducted job analysis and job evaluations based on a point factor system which had been in place for decades. It was the organization that also had job descriptions that were decades old. I jokingly told managers to tell me what grade they wanted the job to have and I could get it there. Our job analysis process had evolved into a bureaucratic boondoggle, to coin a phrase from the text. It was a waste of time and effort, but the bureaucracy required the activity. When working for the Noel Group, we developed a job analysis process with the help of outside consultants that was simple and very useful. It worked great and was very beneficial to the organization. Our job analysis allowed us to compare jobs within the organization and also with the marketplace. It provided consistency and stability in our pay system. So, like any other HR program, or sales program, or research program, or any other program for that matter, job analysis can be an important function that contributes much to the organization, or a weight around the organization's neck that helps strangle growth and encourages mediocrity. Remember, job analysis is merely collecting data on the subject job. That data results in job descriptions and job specifications. Garbage in, garbage out. The question is not, do we need the data? Of course we do. We need to know what people do or should do and what kinds of people we should hire to do those things. Needing the data is not a question. It's what we do with the data that determines the value of the job analysis process. To put it into the context of the home, do you need a personal or family budget? Absolutely you do. You should know how you are spending your money. You should know if your spending habits are good or bad. You should know if you are in good financial shape or standing on the brink of bankruptcy. But the real test of the effectiveness and usefulness of a budget process is what you do with the data. Do you use the data to formulate better spending habits? Do you use the data for the future? Do you use the data to develop tools and processes of analysis that will improve your life? Or do you use the data merely to explain why you're on the brink of disaster to your spouse, parents, creditors, etc.? Do you use the data to provide inflexible barriers to new investment that may be beneficial? In other words, does your budget become a limiting factor that prevents necessary risk to reach success? What do you do with the data? That is the effectiveness question around budgeting and around job analysis as well. My opinion is that job analysis is a necessary process. It is important, but it can get away from you and your organization, so take care in its development and management. The authors indicate that how much detail to include in the data and how the organization uses the data is a judgmental call. And I agree, judgment is subjective. It is the subjective application of objective data. And that is one of the topics I will explore in the next lecture. We will also discuss job evaluations and building pay structures, which is the process that uses the data gathered in the job analysis and compiled in the job descriptions and job specifications. Our discussions next week will encompass 2 chapters, but they are related and opposite sides of the same coin. So let's explore how we use job analysis data we have just collected.